I will start my welcome with a brief introduction to the speaker and to the chairman of today's meeting. Professor Mahadevan is of course known to persons in Bangalore quite well, but a few points about him for the information of others I will be presenting. He is Professor of Operation Management at the Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore. He has been teaching there since 1992. And it's quite interesting to note that he is the founding Vice Chancellor of the Chinmaya Vishwa Vidyapita, a university, specially meant for Sanskrit and Indic knowledge. He was responsible there for creating new generation of academic programs where the ancient knowledge system blends with the contemporary knowledge system. It's a long biodata, which of course I will not be able to cover or not be able to do the justice. Quite interestingly for me and for many of us, he is an engineer, basically an engineer. He has a BE in production engineering from Indic College of Engineering. Then he has an MTech and PhD in industrial engineering and management from IIT Chennai. He has a very wide range of experience in teaching, research, consulting, academic administration, a variety of other experiences which he has picked up on the way. He was earlier, Mahadevan was EADS SMA Chair Professor, also at IIM Bangalore. He has a lot of experience outside India also. He has worked in the Dartmouth College, New Hampshire. He was a consultant for Deloitte in LLP USA. And he has been on the board of trustees of many of the NGOs providing community and social service. He is also on a variety of the editorial board of several learned journals in management. He has been confirmed the IKS Best Teacher Award and several other awards also. Further, goes into details of the management qualifications, like he's a specialist in blockchain development things, which I don't understand. So I'm not going to cover any of that. He is playing a very significant role in promoting Sanskrit and Sanskriti, that is culture. Incidentally, in 2011, when JAIN University had a brainstorming session to start an activity towards history and culture, which nowadays is being called Indian knowledge system or whatever, he was one of the invitees. Perhaps you remember, he offered a lot of interesting comments, and based on that only the CAHC was started in 2012. He is a visionary in the execution of Sanskrit promotion activities. He can speak in Sanskrit very well. But if somebody is interested, later on you can question him in Sanskrit. And you can see that you would have seen in the invitation also his book, which our Vice Chancellor is carrying today for the talk. To bring out a book on Indian knowledge system is not easy. And he is the right person in the sense, not only the domain knowledge, he is a domain specialist. And he has been able to put people together, whether you call it supply chain management or whatever, I have no idea. However, he has brought people together who can contribute for that, and he has managed that. I mean, that is in operations management, and the book is there in front of you. It has already got very good reviews. So this is in brief our today's speaker. Now about our chairman of today's talk, Dr. Singh, he's quite well known. I mean, he's our own Vice Chancellor, I will not introduce you. But there are a few outside people, so the occasion demands I say a few words. I myself did not know that he was an Air Force man. He is from Air Force. That's what the biodata also says. He joined Air Force 1981 to 1994. Pretty long period, you know. At the age of 16 years, they had joined Air Force. And then, you know, he's a self-made man, as you can understand, you know. Later on, he has got several qualifications. He has a PhD from strategic finance, and he is a TEDx speaker. He has been the Vice Chancellor of Hansal University, Gurgaon, then RBU Mohali, Goenka University, Gurgaon, Amity University, Madhya Pradesh, variety of universities which are listed here. Also has a management specialist in finance, that is the way that I could understand, because with Masters in Economics, a qualified CFA and PhD in Strategic Finance. There are many other interesting things. One of the things which attracted my attention is that he has been one of the movers and shakers. I don't know what it means, maybe you people would understand it better. I will ask him later on Daily World Post, on FM channel in 2016 and 2017. He represented India along with other BRIC countries at the International Design Summit in Italy. He is a very widely travelled person. He has been awarded the Peter Drucker Memorial Award of Excellence in 2020. This is in brief our young Vice Chancellor of JAIN University, who is taking, as he himself many times has said, it is the JAIN 2.0. So this is one more step in that direction. With this brief introduction, I once again welcome all of you to this seminar. And also I welcome both Professor Mahadevan and Dr. Singh. And I now hand over the stage to Dr. Rajsi to conduct the Yes, sir, please.
Our distinguished speaker of the day, Dr. Mahadevan, Professor I. Bengaluru, and former Vice Chancellor, Dr. R. Jayanagar, who is the Chair Professor of Indian Knowledge System of ISDC and JAIN University, Center for Ancient History and Culture. Someone who I can continue listening to for days together if time permits. My colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, very warm welcome to JAIN University for this very, very important session. It's very, very contemporary, which is very timely, because all universities, particularly we at JAIN, have been implementing National Education Policy 2020, where art, history, culture has been emphasized. Apart from that, not only NEP, but I think at JAIN, the center has been in existence more than a decade now, and some pioneering work has been done. So much so that we recently got recognized as IKS Center by Ministry of Education and got significant funding to further the knowledge in Indian knowledge system. I brought this book I had received from Mahadevan, of course, much earlier, but I wanted to get it autographed. And also take some points from here and there and at least sound contextual when I stand before you. Because as was told, I'm a student of economics and finance, I have not done any work in this area. But I'm keenly interested, I keep reflect on various thoughts. I remember while I was working with Indian Air Force and about to complete my CFA program, the student of the institute which conferred award on Professor ICFA, as was mentioned in the introduction. And I came across a book wherein, it's a marketing book. It says, Confessions of Shameless Self-Promoters by Debbie Allen. It was published somewhere mid-1995, I believe. And it's nothing but a collection of 68 marketing gurus, what they say in terms of self-promoting. And I'm not going by what those 68 marketing gurus said. But the foreword to this book was written by Dilip Cherian. You know, social activist and media personality we have in India. And he says, we Indians, and he linked it to self-promotion shamelessly, you know. He says, very subdued people. And he traced it back to the history. He said, with centuries of foreign rule, we as Indians were safe, we were respected if we kept our mouth shut. And the process you became subdued and became part of culture. So much so that to our children in the family we say, don't talk much, don't beat your own drums, let people say about it. And even if something genuinely we have done, we are hesitant in projecting it to the public. So he beautifully summarizes this lack of self-promotion among Indians, and he says, lack of self-promotion among Indians is historically motivated, it's culturally programmed, it's genetically imbibed, and socially sanctified. Now, everything he said in such beautiful way, all those, what the 68 marketing gurus said. And for the first time, I started reflecting on what history can do to generations, to a society, to a nation. This was just a glimpse or maybe a tinkering of thought that in what direction you should think when you think about history. Personally, I didn't like history, to be very frank, within the school and college. But then as you evolve, as you go places, as you start working, you start realizing how important it is. Around the same time, Dr. R.A. Mashelkar, who was the DG CSIR at that time, he talked about his beautiful concept of that research is something which consumes money and converts data and information into knowledge. But he said, the same knowledge, if it can be created into knowledge through innovation, it generates money. And he says we all should try to complete this cycle. There won't be any shortage of funds for research ever again. So he's taken research further to innovation and solutions for the problems of society and the industry. And then around the same time, mid-1990s, we had this controversy of neem and haldi being patented by the Western world. I think we could get back one, we could get cancelled one and the other one there. And there are many other things being contested. And it was primarily highlighted that because we did not document the processes of development of knowledge or the concepts in the history. India has a very, very long history. And therefore, if it's a long history, it must have a lot of knowledge which evolves. People undertake work. And then as I was moving towards education from Indian Air Force, I was very keenly learning the philosophies of education. And I remember first time I learned philosophies of education was, this was beginning of the 20th century, philosophy, and then mid 20th century, and then end of 20th century, the three philosophies. And the latest philosophy I learned was philosophy of existentialism, which says there's so much of knowledge exists in this universe, in this world. Some of us may know, others may not know, until we explore. And it was beautifully summarized by one sentence in that book that a tree falls in a jungle, it makes cracking noise. But it says that it makes cracking noise only if someone listens to it. Otherwise, nobody knows what kind of noise it makes. That's the exploration of knowledge, which is direct relevance to what we are trying to do. Even though I'm a product of, like many of you, of the modern education system for which we blame the policy makers, foreign government, and we can't keep on blaming Macaulay for lifelong. In fact, I think we've blamed enough. It's been 70 years plus. I think we should take over and change the system, which I think National Education Policy 2020 has been a very, very bold step in that direction. Very candid document, and I often say it's a dream policy I could think of personally, because I have been part of the earlier education policies also where blame game is endless. And this policy says, guys, do what you feel like doing. And we as professors do not know where to look, whom to complain and whom to blame. It's completely left on to us what we do. And as we implement national education policy, I think it's a golden opportunity for us to regain that past glory which India is known for. And it used to be the destination for education for the entire world. It's not difficult to regain that past glory. And I think in that context, if you look at education, our own history of thousands of years, which of course had breaks in between, because the knowledge was not transferred because of vested interests. Somewhere it was suppressed, somewhere it was hidden, somewhere it was distorted, somewhere even manipulated for various vested interest by the people who were governing the country. And then very conveniently, our thought process was vitiated. And we as a generation started thinking, and what about the next generation? Anything which is Indian is something which is not interesting. Anything which is non-Indian becomes interesting. And I think all of us are struggling with that thought in the generation we belong to, and perhaps the subsequent generation. And this has affected not only the development of science and technology, which has made us lag behind many, many similar countries in our neighborhood. I often give this data, something like 56,000 versus 14,97,000, the number of patents in 2020 alone. In China, 14,97,000, India, some 56,000. We are similar countries in terms of population, or we belong to the same region. There's no reason why you should be lagging behind this. And somewhere I think this canvas on which we can innovate has been shrunk because of these historical reasons. And it is in this context, the IKS, which I think the government rightfully has taken up and made it a part of education system, will recoup to large extent what we have lost. It's not only self-respect, it is not only leads to the national security issues when we are economically dependent. I think economic well-being also leads to flourishing or happiness, in whatever term you want to describe the well-being of population. It's all interlinked. If we have invented some knowledge of how can anybody take the benefit. So I think it is left on to we as teachers and researchers how we undertake studies in IKS. Sir, you'll be happy to note that after AICT finalized the curriculum on Indian knowledge system, we got the curriculum from the chairman of committee, Dr. Charan, who's there. And we have already gotten it approved by Academic Council to be offered as a minor stream across the university. Though for engineering it will be mandatory, as had been mandated by AICT. But any other student in the university can take this, and it can lead to a minor specialization if they take 4 modules over 4 semesters. So bachelor's as well as master's can take it. That's our humble contribution, apart from, of course, a very, very highly specialized center which Dr. R.N. Iyengar heads. As I said, they have done some work which is absolutely amazing. I have heard him up to 2 hours, but I can listen to him, I said, for full day if required, but time doesn't permit. So I keep stealing the time from him whenever I get an opportunity. It's always so fascinating and so enlightening. I won't stand between you and the speaker, but JAIN 2.0, he referred, it's something, our model of implementing national education policy. We call it JAIN 2.0. It's a unique model which is taking shape, and I'm sure all the aspects of national education policy will be taken care of. And this book, which is right here, I got it autographed after I came here from Dr. Saab. It's so beautifully designed as a textbook, you know. It starts with course outcomes at the end of the chapter. Of course, chapters are with a lot of illustrations and box items to highlight certain aspects. Questions which can give you an idea about how to design assignments and projects for the students. You can pick up directly some of the material given there for assessing the students. I think it was much needed. It fills a very, very wide gap which existed in the study material on IKS related topic. And I'm sure this also throws open a lot of opportunities for young researchers to take it further and perhaps write dozens and scores of books on each and every topic which this particular book covers. So I welcome once again, and sir, that there's nothing big about the movers and shakers, a program called by FM channel. So what they do, there's nothing great which is required in individual. I was posted in Punjab, and the FM channel there features one personality every year. And the program structure is that they talk about you, about your profession, about you as a person, the family and everything. And in between they keep playing songs which you like to listen to. It's a radio program which goes on for 2 hours and is broadcast at a very prime time, evening 4 to 6 on Sundays. So I was constantly featured for 2 years, and then its supplement is the Daily World Post is a newspaper, a global newspaper. They also feature you there, so that was an addition to this My Icon program as the movers and shakers, nothing much. So anybody who perhaps heads a university will be called for this, so nothing special about it. But thank you so much for mentioning that. Welcome once again, and sir, over to you, sir. Thank you so much. I can.
Yes, put it on the side.
few minutes I'll stand there habitually and then I will move on to the stage. Yes. Dr. Singh, Dr. Iyengar and other esteemed colleagues of the JAIN University. It's indeed my pleasure to be here with all of you. So out of his kindness, Dr. Iyengar invited me to this forum, and it will be definitely my pleasure to share with you some thoughts on Indian knowledge system, which happens to be on account of trying to write a book on that, about which Dr. Singh also briefly spoke about and so on. I think we are really going through some interesting times. Every society goes through its own roller coaster rides. So in 1700, if we contributed 25% of the world GDP was the contribution from India, it took 200 years to bring it to 2%. And now we are trying to inch back to 3% and 4.5% and so on. It merely shows that every society, every civilization has its own roller coaster rides. The only interesting thing is maybe we are fortunate, especially the younger ones in this room are even more fortunate, to partake in this next ascent of this, I think, civilization in terms of bringing back some of the thoughts which has driven us a great deal and so on. So what I propose to do is to very quickly take you through three things. First, I want to start by saying, so I think even before we get into IKS, I think we need to ask, do we really need IKS? Is it a political agenda which is being pushed, by the government, or is it something more than that? Because this is a very natural question that we need to answer. You may be on whatever sides, it doesn't really matter. So I think very briefly I want to touch on this as to why do we need Indian knowledge systems today, and then get into a little formal definition of Indian knowledge system, the way I have conceptualized it in my book. Also dip into a bit of the literature that I could lay my hands on in the last 2 years. It appears to be a vast ocean of very interesting material. There was only so much that I could dip into it to manage it in the form of an introductory textbook and so on. So I will quickly sort of go over it. And I would like to end by talking about some issues of teaching IKS. So that's how I plan to sort of cover today's. So the question is, do we really need Indian knowledge systems, or we are just doing it because it's a flavor of the month now and so something new which we need to do and so on. So I have a few arguments to make. I think the first issue is the issue of business, government and society are as old as rocks and rivers. I don't think we have found problems only in the last 100 years. I think as long as old as rocks and rivers, there are issues. We may call it with different names. So therefore, I am sure people have thought about it all the time. And therefore, to suddenly say we don't need all of them, maybe we will start afresh. In fact, I have been hearing that, that only we knew how to solve problems. That in a way implies our ancestors were idiots. And that implies in another 100 years, we all will also become idiots. It's a simple logic. I don't have to argue it in a very... So I don't think that's the way to look at things. I think civilization goes through its own steps of evolution and understanding and so on. So I think that's the first thing. Second thing is, I think everybody has a cauliflower on their head. I don't think the cauliflower was, the brain was planted some 100 years back. Neuroscientists suddenly arrived on the scene and said there is something called brain. I think it is as old as rocks and rivers. So certainly I think thinking has always been a very unique feature of human beings. Therefore, there is always merit in understanding what has been the thought process, what has been some of the things which had driven people to look at problems and issues. And I keep saying this, there is a nice shloka in Bhagavad Gita, in chapter 3, Arjuna asked a very nice question. Atakkena prektoyam papam charati purushaha, anichanapi vashneya baladiva niyojitaha. In fact, I keep, when I teach Bhagavad Gita in my Bhagavad Gita elective in IAM, I tell them this particular question has an infinite shelf life. Million years back, people would have asked that question. Million years later also, they will have to ask this question. Today I have a problem with my boss. I had a bad day with let's say my boss. I come back home My 2-year-old daughter or son comes and throws tantrums at me, and then I shout at this particular young child, or I shout at my better half, or I misbehave so much with my well-meaning colleagues. I have a lot of respect. In all these occasions, this shloka will come next day morning. Atakkena prayitoyam papam charati purusha. Why did I become victim of situation? So what I am trying to say is problems are not new. Problems are old. Therefore, there is merit in understanding how people have even posed a problem, how they have solved a problem, how they have looked at what has been done. I don't think we have any reason to say we don't need any of those, because I think there is a good thinking process. There is this concept in strategy. In strategy we talk about what is called path dependence. When it's a simple thing, I don't have to throw jargons. All that it says is the path that you can walk is a function of the path that you have already walked. It's very simple. And Gary Hamel and Prahlad have given a nice core competency theory and all that. Fine. I think the fundamental message I am saying is, how can you just disassociate yourself? How can you create discontinuity in a thought process? It doesn't make too much sense, because path dependence is very, very true, very, very real of things. Therefore, I think we need to understand the path that this society has walked. And then there lies the future pathway in which we'll have to go and so on. And there are a few other reasons. Why should we reinvent the wheel? For all we know, some problem that we are trying to solve has been solved, has been looked at in a particular way. So I think we should have the benefit of that. Therefore, why should we reinvent the wheel? And the last point also I would like to make is, I don't think by doing more and more of a certain paradigm we will find solutions. I mean, these are very fundamental things. We don't need IKS even for it to argue or in support or otherwise. All that I'm saying is, I think by its very nature, knowledge needs to have continuity. Knowledge needs to be constantly understood, looked at, synthesized, refurbished, whatever. We may have to do all that. So if you take all these arguments, I think there is a lot of merit to look at IKS. In fact, I am not by any stretch of imagination, let us glorify IKS. When we wrote the book, we were very clear. The last thing we will do is to glorify Indian knowledge systems. I think we should see something and put it on the table and leave it. The rest is for people to understand what we can take out of it. So I am not saying we need to glorify, but I think it's extremely important for us to have that continuity. Therefore, the first thing I want to say is IKS is needed. If we haven't done it for the last 200 years, I'll come to it towards the end of the talk. There have been reasons for it, and maybe it's time for us to question those assumptions and all that. So we'll come to it a little later. So with this big background, the other background is what our Dr. Singh was also talking about. In the first page of my first chapter, the first page of the book talks about it. How we have actually lost out quite a bit in world intellectual property regime that we are going through now. So I just want to tell you that IKS is not merely about knowing some ancestral knowledge. That's not what it is. I mean, it may appear to be like that at the outset. I think it's all about protecting received wisdom. It's all about economic security and national pride. All these are part of the knowledge of a society which has evolved over thousands of years, particularly a society which has lived for several millennia. This is all the more important. Documenting the traditional knowledge, to provide evidence of prior knowledge, but all these are very important in an intellectual property regime. I mean, in very simple terms, again, instead of getting into detailed jargons and so on, I think patenting is a function of saying X knew how it is done, the knowledge about something ahead of Y. And if X knew ahead of Y, then X is supposed to have a certain patenting or a right over Y. It's as simple as that. And this is where we have lost quite a bit. Dr. Mashelkar, when he was the Director General of CSIR, have fought battles. We won a couple of them. There are quite a few. Arhar, for example, we couldn't. Okay, neem we couldn't, turmeric we could, I think. So, there are a variety of different stages. So, I want to quickly show you two stories. So, a US company was awarded a patent for neem as a pesticide. We could not, although we have been using it, culturally neem is very much part of our, therapeutic routine. Unfortunately, we were not adequately prepared in terms of proving it for such agencies who are in the business of awarding the patents and so on. So I think we failed in our efforts to get the US patents on products of the name cancelled. We couldn't do that. Of course, we know about basmati rice, we know about turmeric. By then we really woke up a little bit. And there were two Indian professors, one Das and another, I don't remember the name, both of them in a US university, Mississippi University or somewhere, I don't know. They applied the patent for turmeric. And at that time, we were able to, it took a while, of course. It was not easy. I mean, it's very surprising. Knowledge which is part of our culture, which is part of our society for thousands of years, requires enormous effort to bring it in a particular format and indeed show that this is a knowledge which existed ahead of what they were claiming. They were using some papers written in the last 30, 40 years and quoting here and there and trying to get a patent. So what I am saying is that's why we need Indian knowledge system for economic security. I think the future war is not on military, it is a knowledge power. So if we lose, I was told Gayatri mantra has a regional patent in Germany. Veda has a patent in Germany. So how much we are going to lose? Are we just going to push all of them behind the carpet and think that whatever we have learned in the last 150 years are probably the ultimate Brahma Satya and then we have to live with it? I think that's not a very intelligent approach for a society which is endowed with a very long history of thinking. So therefore, I think we need to really bother about IKS. Looks like we have lost some ground, but there is always time to catch up. Maybe we need a little more effort now, and the government, what it is doing through NEP and other things, probably time alone will tell as to how this is going to help us. It is going to be not easy, let me tell you. The system is completely deeply entrenched in a non-IKS kind of a framework. So we are all struggling to find out what to do in terms of how do you bring it, how do you look at it, how do you formally import, all these questions are there. So with this sort of a brief background, let me very quickly touch upon a certain definition which I have attempted to give for this term IKS and then move on with that. So IKS has three terms, I, K and S. So let me sort of define it in their own ways. I think by Indian what we mean is, of course I have spoken about it in a little more detail in the first chapter, I am just being brief here. Indigenous source of knowledge generated by the Indian society. I have qualified who qualifies to be an Indian society, and the Indian actually means the Akhanda Bharat, not the political formation post 1947. That's a very recent convenient mechanism. Whereas when we say Indian knowledge system, it can be from stretching from Afghanistan on one side to Burma or even Far East on the other side. That's a kind of spread which was this Akhanda Bharat. So therefore, Indian certainly has a geographical sense, and also it has a certain sense. In fact, all those who just come here for about 6 months, 1 year, a couple of years and write a treatise, translate a Rig Veda, all those, I generally don't consider them as Indian. The simple reason is language is preserved in our practices. So you cannot translate and hope to, a simple idea. You take a humorous joke in your mother tongue and please tell it in English, you will start crying instead of laughing. Language preserves a lot of things, the choice of words, what it means. Therefore, from an alien culture coming and trying to understand it, how genuine, I'm not talking about the genuinity of it, I'm saying such material I don't really strictly consider as Indian. Even when we wrote this book, we were not touching any of those material. Very rarely we were. Unless the yardstick we used was such a person must have spent 20, 30 years here, would have been deeply, in a way, imbibed with the cultural practices, then we are willing to look at some material. So these kinds of small little things that we kept for ourselves to define what is Indian. Of course, knowledge is that which emanates from the wisdoms and insights arising. Knowledge is always tacit, it's not explicit. One can make an effort to make it explicit. Knowledge always is tacit. That's why, in Taittiriya Upanishad, when Bhrigu went to his father and asked, he says, Tapasa Brahma Vijijñāsasva, Tapo Brahmeti. That's all. 5 times he went, he said, Satapo Tapyata. Then he went, he said, Tapasa Brahma Vijijñāsasva, Tapo Brahmeti. I think knowledge is tacit. There's a lot of things that happens in every individual's mind. So it's all deep insights, out of experiences, Shravana, Manana and Nididhyasana. There's a lot of rumination, there's a lot of internalization, thinking through. All those are actually knowledge. But then that's very nice to define it that way. Somewhere that tacit knowledge has to become explicit. And it's codified, either orally transmitted or maybe put it, in today's scheme of things, you can document it in a formal sense in some literary forms. But there's a great deal of knowledge which are not strictly in the literary category. We have very rich rural health traditions. If we are not able to say neem is something which we are not able to protect, it's simply because there is a very rich rural health tradition. These are all oral in nature, but they are knowledge. Who said they are not knowledge? But certainly the whole gamut. But from a textbook, from a sense of formally imparting knowledge, we may be a little bit constrained to go around a formal documented set of knowledge, and wherever possible a little bit of non-literary sources also we can. But by and large, that's what knowledge is to a large extent. And it pervades all the domains, spiritual, religious, and secular, whatever you want to call, other day-to-day, useful things. I think knowledge permeates into all the three domains. And then, of course, there is this third thing called system, which is, in a way, is there a structured way you can arrange the knowledge, classify it in a particular way, because we need a certain structure. Otherwise, sometimes it's very difficult to make sense of what is happening. So we have some very interesting structures. In the book, I talked about two structures. There is one Chaturdasha Vidyasthana, which is able to classify one part of the knowledge in a particular way. So when I say system, a way by which you can make sense of how this knowledge can be in a compact and a complete fashion classified so that we understand the interconnections, the roles, and all that kind of things. So this is my understanding of the term Indian knowledge system. We had just attempted this. Broadly, the Indian knowledge system can be either literary source or a non-literary source. As I told you, we have a very rich oral tradition, and therefore we cannot do away them from the gamut of knowledge, although we may have practical difficulties of bringing it in a particular way. That doesn't take it away in any case. So we have literary and non-literary. In the literary, I have broadly classified them as Sanatana Dharma oriented and other Dharma, because that seems to make a substantive difference in terms of how do you understand the corpus. And in Sanatana Dharma, you have, of course, the core literature, which are our scriptures and our Shrutis, Smritis, and Itihasa Puranas, Dharma Shastras, and so on and so forth, which can be either Chaturdasha Vidyasthana or Ashtadasha Vidyasthana. There is a way by which it can be nicely sort of classified. But then, moment you say Indian knowledge system, the reason why we brought this is, moment you say Indian knowledge system, lot of people zero in on a part of it and think that's all it is all about. It's all religious, it's all dogmatic. There are all these keywords which are all in our minds. From where did it come, I have no idea. But then they are all part of our thinking and understanding of the issue, which is quite often we are confined to a small portion here. Whereas if you look at Sanatana Dharma, there is a very rich literature which belongs to things more than this. And why do I call it as Sanatana Dharma? Because you take Aryabhatiya, he will still owe allegiance to, when he talks about Yuga, he will owe allegiance to the Yuga systems, which is part of our Vedic corpus and the derived sources from there. So all this literature, what you will find is they owe allegiance to the Shruti and the Smriti by and large. That's why I call it as Sanatana Dharma, other literature. Then, of course, in the other dharmic traditions, I think significant contributions are from Buddhist and Jain. So therefore, we have a good amount of contributions in mathematics and even in alchemy and a few areas like that. So that forms the sort of, and of course the third division of the literary corpus is regional. I mean, so much is there in Tamil or Kannada or Telugu or, take all these languages. They might either broadly align to the Sanatana Dharma framework, maybe improvise it, retell it in a way which is much easier for the local vernacular to make sense of and so on, but it's also a huge literature. I don't think we can just ignore it by any stretch of imagination. So you have a wealth of the same material that you see there is also available in a very improvised form sometimes. in a different lens with which they have seen and so on, but they are available in the regional languages. So this forms the literary portion of the knowledge that is available. Of course, there is a lot of non-literary, which is broadly we can call it as oral tradition. It may be with respect to living practices, health, for example. You have, Chatusashti Kalas are by and large oral. In many ways, it's all skill-based and transmitted down the ages through some oral practices and so on. So that's how I think one can broadly understand what is there in Indian knowledge systems. As I told you, you have, if you're talking of basic and applied sciences, you have math, astronomy, very rich literature, continuously for the last 2000 years. Up to, I would say, 1750, mathematics has been continuously flowing. So interesting to see that. It's not, despite all the other disturbances and other things that are happening in the country, you see a continuous flow of ideas which are built on the earlier one, writing a Bhashya and that, coming with new, it's going on and on like that. Till 1750, I would say there is a very good flow. Even then it has been, but by and large I am saying substantive part is up to 1700, 1750. And engineering and technology, metalworking, I will quickly touch upon a few of them. I'm not going to get into details of all of them, but I will peep into it a little bit, all these different ideas. You have rich literature, you have this Ashtanga Hridaya and Charaka and Sushruta, which are the three great works in health, wellness and all that. Our darshanas, particularly, Sankhya and Yoga has quite a bit of solid background on psychology. If we have to teach Indian psychology, I think we must very well read Sankhya and Yoga. Very important. And even Upanishads like, Mandukya Upanishad. These are all very important for us to teach psychology and consciousness and so on. I think why we are not able to do is a different question. But anyway, then you have Niti Shastras, you have the Samanya Niti and the Raja Niti, depending upon how you want to give a little sense of code of conduct, living and so on. Of course, Rajaniti, it's there in Itihasas, it's of course there in Arthashastra and Kamandiki and Niti Sara and so other things are there. Shivaji's time also there is a nice Niti Shastra written in the 16th century, very nice, on some specific aspects of Rajaniti and so on. Of course, there is a very rich repository of aesthetics, kavyas. We haven't covered some of these in the book. In our original thinking, we had some 22 chapters. But then we were told this is just too much. We also felt let's hop, step and jump rather than, just run into it. Maybe in the second edition we'll certainly bring aesthetics and kavyas and all are very important. I think we have a very rich literature, linguistics, all those things are part of it. On the Buddhist and the Jain literature, of course, we have, of course, there are religious and philosophical works which are basically about the tenets of the religion. But we have other applications also we find, on Buddhist works, we have some mathematical concepts. In fact, the shipbuilding and all that, there are some references and all that in Jatakas and all those we are able to see. First century work of Nagarjuna and Rasaratnakara is a work on alchemy. So I think people who teach chemistry must look at some of these texts. Rasaratna Samuchaya, Rasaratnakara, nice books are there, I think we should read. Why even in Varaha Mihira in one of the chapter, he talks about the permutation combination of how do you get 1783 different perfumes with 4 ingredients and 4, with a nice problem. There are 32 shlokas in a chapter in which the problem is posed and the problem is solved, and we can look at those kinds of things. Vishnu Dharmottara Purana has some interesting ideas. I'll touch upon a little bit of them. And Jain literature, of course, mathematics is one area where people have contributed 2 power. In fact, in 6th century BC, there are references to number 2 power 196, which is the count of the number of living beings in the earth. Some such numbers are there, 2 power 196 or some such numbers. So I think mathematics has been a unique contribution in Jain, and of course, Mahavira's work in Ganita Sara Sangraha is a very phenomenal work in the 8th century CE and so on. So these literature, on one hand you have spiritual and religious dimensions to it. Unfortunately, a large number of people get confined to that. They have been told, Indian knowledge system means only religion, not even spiritual at times, or spiritual. But then there is a very rich literature which we seem to have. So this book only talks about, except for a very small introductory part in which we talk about the Chaturdasha Vidyasthana for about 20% of the book. The remaining 80% of the book talks only about mathematics and astronomy and all these things, because I think it's time we sort of get into it and bring them out and understand what has been the thinking process. So with this, let me quickly go over. So anyway, there is one table in the first chapter of the book where we are very quickly, it's not at all exhaustive by any stretch of imagination. What can be accommodated in a page, we just put that many. Simple rule was, try to put, reduce the font size in one page, you try to get a table. At least sprinkle some works in some time periods and so on. That's all we did. It's no way complete, but it's sort of a trailer of what one can expect. Variety of topics, if you see, that being discussed in these texts. As an indication, we just used a couple of keywords to sort of say what are some of the topics which are being covered and so on. And unfortunately, we have certain disadvantages when it comes to dating of a civilization. Because if you use the current mechanisms and methodologies for dating, many of our literature cannot be dated, because it is beyond, outside of this kind of a measurement mechanism. Even with all that, I think people have been able to go up to 3000 BC, maybe 4000 BC, although a few people like Nilesh Vogue has gone up to 11,000 BC and all that, but that's okay for his Surya Siddhanta and all that. But in any case, I think notwithstanding the historicity of how old and so on, I think the value of the information, the kind of perspectives and insights are, I think, very important for us. Therefore, one needs to really look at it very carefully. So let me now take you through a bit of, let us peep into IKS corpus very quickly. For 15 minutes, I will zoom through some of the things that we have been able to lay our hands on when we wrote this book. Let's talk about metalworking industry. We may be wondering, what is it that Indians have done? And this is one area in which there has been a phenomenal contribution which has happened. In fact, in 10th century CE, we had industrial grade production of zinc, millions of tons and that kind of thing. 2nd century BC, 4th century BC, we were able to do ferrous carbon alloys, wood steel, for example. So look at this, for example. This is a gold coin of Gupta king Samudragupta, kept at the British Museum, dated 330 to 376 CE, 4th century in the first millennia, common era. This is a 1st century Andhra Pradesh royal earring, again in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Now if you look at it, a person who knows metallurgy would know what is involved in making an intricate ornament of this kind. A whole gamut of metalworking technology, metal forming technology, tools for shaping, everything will come into play. And we are talking about 1st century BC. Just to tell you, coins, stamping these coins is not an easy joke. It talks about a certain kind of development we have had in metalworking technology, in extraction, in separation of the metals, metal forming technologies, embossing. So many things are involved. It's not easy, actually. This is a simple illustration of how zinc was extracted in this country in 2nd century BC onwards. This is called a downward distillation process. See, what happens is zinc, if you heat the zinc ore, at 500 degrees the zinc vaporizes. At 600 degrees it becomes zinc oxide. So now you have to capture between 500 and 600. So they came up with, this is the de facto standard for zinc extraction today, practiced by Indians 2,500 years back. So this is, there is as it is called, there is a cooling mechanism. It's a rough sketch. It's called a downward drift distillation. There's a yantra which is able to extract that gas, which is in a vapor form, cool it and then collect the zinc liquid. And zinc K3 mines in Rajasthan, IIT Kanpur and a few people in University of Baroda have done some good work. There is enormous amount of ore processing, ore extraction, separation of the metal, alloys of the zinc and copper. Wonderful work. In fact, I came across 2 books written in 1914 and 1918. One book is called Copper in India. Another book is called Iron in India. They're all part of the references in the book anyway. Just about 90 pages, 100 pages. Very interesting. Very good references of what kind of artifacts are informing us, what kind of things have happened, how the metalworking technology must have developed over time and stabilized and so on. Wood steel, for example. Wood steel is being used for manufacturing these famous Damascus blades. And that has gone from part of Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. That's why it is called Ukku. And in Tamil it is called Eggu. And that's become wood steel. So it's all, in fact in Pandya time, from the western coast, the Cheras were, Kodungalur and all those are very important ports. There is a maritime trade, very rich maritime trade in sending ferrous carbon alloys and so on. So like this, there are many interesting things that we have. I mean, this may look very interesting. So to the extent it's being stolen every other day. Panchaloga idols are being stolen and taken away from this country. Now to make such a finish is what is called Madhuchishta Vidhanam. Madhu Uchishta Vidhanam. It is the last wax process. From 17th century Westerners are practicing that. Until then they are not aware of this. So we have been doing it. Our 5th century Chola idols and all great artifacts. Such a finish is that last wax process. It's called Madhuchishta Vidhanam. You see it in Vishnu Dharmottara Purana. You'll see it, references of that in Varaha Migira. And all those kinds of things are available. Such beautiful looking things are all expressive of how we are good in metalworking technology. These are tools in Charaka's thing. I am told that the tools have the capability to longitudinally split a hair. That means, so the interesting part is, then the metalworking technology to develop such sharp tools is what is the interesting part there. It's not easy. And you would be very good in ferrous carbon alloys. If you are a mechanical engineer, I think without a temperature transformation time diagram, you are not a mechanical engineer. We all have learnt it. Unless you know what happens to the time and temperature, and because this entire ferrous carbon alloy is all about time temperature transformation. That knowledge must have been very good. Because in the 11th century Rasaratna Samuchaya, there are complete categories of ferrous carbon alloys listed there. Mundaka, Loha, this and that, and there are some 12, 13 of them. I have a table in which I have mentioned all those with those references and so on in chapter 11 of the book. There are all these definitions of different varieties of alloys and steels and so on. Wood steel, I already talked about it, is a unique Indian process of making steel. As late as 1923, they have not been able to replicate wood steel. In fact, modern material science, Michael Faraday apparently tried, he failed. Modern metallurgists and material science people, I have been reading it somewhere, that wood steel has been a great source for trying to understand how this composition of this ferrous carbon is being made. They have not been able to replicate. And that speaks volumes of it. Unfortunately, in 17th century, after 18th century, it came to a grinding halt. Why? Because British imposed a mining ban. They imposed a production tax. So this industry has to abruptly stop. So now it is only a few people who know to do a few things, which is a father-son kind of a small little trade here and there. That's how unfortunately it is happening. French writer, in ancient times the Indians excelled in the art of constructing vessels. The English, attentive to everything in naval architecture, have borrowed from the Hindus many improvements. The Indian vessels unite elegance and utility and are models of patience and fine workmanship. But we are not there in shipbuilding industry today. We will have to regain it after some time, perhaps. I think we have lost out many things in the last 5 years. These are those classifications of Rasaratna Samuchaya which I talked about. The different classifications of Kanta Loha, Tikshna Loha and Munda Loha. Sub-classifications from very interesting 11th century Rasaratna Samuchaya. You find these shloka and all these different definitions and their properties are available in an 11th century work called Rasaratna Samuchaya. Math and astronomy, there is a great deal. I don't have to really spend much time except to quickly tell you. What you see here is a very beautiful shloka which is based on Aryabhatian representation of numbers. This entire shloka is nothing but, in all engineers use what is called clock's table. in which there is a R sign differences table. We actually read it and then try to get them. You don't have to do it. That's all. This is Maki. Maki is 225. You have Maki, Bhakki, Fakhi, Dhaki, Naki. This is a Aryabhatian numbering system with which the entire sign table differences is in the form of a simple shloka, which we have one printed full Clark's table and then we keep referring and so on, just to give you a sense of how they have been able to think about it. Of course, if you talk about the temple architecture, I've been looking at Sumarangana Sutra Dhara, which is King Bhoja's 11th century word, Mayamatam. Although I didn't make much of it, but as an engineer, when I read it, the shlokas and tried to understand what it is, the level of detail in terms of proportions and scales and the other things that you find in the architectural texts are amazing. Again, I do not know why Indian architectural students are not taught Vastu. Today, again, Vastu means he is competing with a share broker and an astrologer. But that's not Vastu when you read it. You don't get that sense at all. I'll tell you what Vastu is the way I have seen it. It's amazing to see how beautifully it has laid out a mechanism of trying to create an artifact. Vastu is creating an artifact, not just a building. It's actually a whole art of trying to think of how do you artistically create something for humankind, actually. Anyway, again, there are references about our in presence of Professor Iyengar, I should not dabble too much into my ignorance in all these matters. I am only trying to say that people have time and again said that 3,000 years back we were able to place some of our astronomical measurements in such a level of accuracy that something is, again, speaking of our ability to keenly observe and come with certain frameworks which are very fundamental for mathematics. Indians have done a lot of work on pan-diagonal magic square. Not just a simple magic square. This is a pan-diagonal magic square, which means you think of this as a cylinder. Don't think of it looks like the cylinder is cut and made a sheet. So if you look at the cylinder, the diagonal of that is going to be this. It's called pan-diagonal. Now this pan-diagonal number will add up, not simple diagonal, not row column. This is a magic sum of 34. You add any pan-diagonal magic, you will get 34. Now Narayana Pandita in 1495, as early as 1495, he said that there are about, I think, 353, I don't remember the exact number, there are only 353 4x4 pan-diagonal magic square possible. In 1916, somebody proved it in the Western world, that the number was indeed 300 and odd, whatever that number is. But as early as 1st century CE, Nagarjuna has come with algorithms for pan-diagonal, not simple magic square, not pan-diagonal magic square. So these are all things which we have really reached the limits much, much earlier than even others thinking about it. That's the kind of thing that you see in mathematics. Of course, you have the 2nd century BC work of Pingala, Chandashastra, in which if you replace Lagu with 1, and Guru with, he used the word Lagu and Guru, which is part of the basic constructing mechanism for Chandra Shastra. You replace Lagu with 1, Guru with 0, then what you find is actually a very interesting binary mathematical principles there. For example, if you take a 10-digit binary number, there are 512 numbers possible, 2 power 10. So you say 100, 1111, some strip of, he has an algorithm to tell you in which row that number will be available. There are 512 of them. So there is a Prastara and there is an algorithm by which you can actually find out, if you tell me a n letter binary word, I will be able to tell you in which row that number is available. Or conversely, you tell me the row number, I will tell you the binary sequence. These are all available in the 2nd century BC. This is a mnemonic based on, it's not Pingalas, but it's based on Pingala Chandra Shastra. They teach it in Sanskrit colleges. Yamata Rajabana Salagam. And it's, if you look at it, Yamata is actually 100 because Lagu, Guru. Then it is actually 100. Then you have Matara, which is 000. So this is actually what is in 1983 called De Bruijn sequence. Computer scientists came with what is called a concept called deep blue in sequence for letter, for a binary letter of 3, which is what this Emata Rajamana Salagam, this is actually a binary cycle. All the 2 power 3, 8 numbers can be got from this cycle. The 8 numbers are 100, 000, 001, 010, 101, 011, 111 and 110. That's how the binary cycle comes. This you find in 2nd century BC in Chandra Shastra, provided you want to look at it from that perspective also. If you say all these are religion and throw it, good luck. That's what you have been doing in the last perhaps couple of centuries or so. Now I wrote a chapter on language, linguistics, and it turned out that I could have written the whole chapter only with computer language, with computer programming words. So this is not the efficient way, but to explain how the Paninian 3983 rules work in for simple terms to begin with. You know, Sanskrit is a very constructive language. Any word can be manufactured. That's why there is no value for a Sanskrit dictionary. For real Sanskrit, you don't need a dictionary. In fact, you will not find many things in the dictionary also anyway. Why? Because in Sanskrit, either you take a pradipadika, which is a nominal root, or a dhatu, which is a verbal root, then you have a pratyaya to it. This is how it is. The whole language can be manufactured like this. You take a root, add a suffix, and then once you add a suffix, you start applying the 3983 rules and see which rule fires a transformation, transform. Having transformed, again go through the entire 3900 in an inefficient way, I am saying. Again go through the 3983 rules. There may be some rule which may be eligible now. Make a transformation. When no more transformation is possible, the final word comes. It's a constructive algorithm. That's how Sanskrit language is. It's perfectly suitable for a way of, it's a generative language with strict logic, very few exceptions. And it's amazing to see there is very few exceptions. Exceptions are there. Any language will have no exception, but it's so few and far between. So, this is in a way an algorithm for generating a Sanskrit word, if you wish. Maybe inefficient, there are people who have worked on it and got a better algorithm. I am just, as an illustration, I am just saying. Now, if you look at samasa, samasa is nothing but a fantastic recursive logic. What they teach as recursion in computer science is exactly the rule in samasa, which is a compound word. How do you get a compound word? You get 20 words which are to be put together. In fact, I took a nice pada from Dakshinamurti Stotra in my book. Nana Chitra Gado Darastita Mahadevan Prabhabasara is a single word coming out of 8 words. So I will show you how that can be constructed. It's a simple recursive logic. Any compound word can be generated if you understand the basic logic. So basically, you have a set of words which are to be combined to make a compound word. And so at every stage, the compound word would have added one more word added to it. So it's a recursive logic. So Sn is nothing but Sn minus 1 plus the nth word is also added to it. So one can actually run it. You can actually run it. I will show you an example. You can do a simple do loop and then get the pradipadika of all the words and run through the do loop, and then once the do loop is over, your compound pradipadika is available. After that, you can get whatever forms you need, whether it's Srilinga, Pullinga, whatever you need, you can. This is how it is. It's a perfect computing algorithm which runs behind all that, and finally all of them are put together, which gives you the pradipadika for the samasa. So this is the example. You have Deepa placed in the belly, udare, in the belly of a pot. Nana Chitra Gadavasdarastita Mahadeva, I removed some of them because I have to get into Sandhi and all that. Nana Chidrasya, that which is pierced, Chidra is whole actually. So if you have to put all of them into a single word, then you have now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words are there. You take the 5 words, extract the stem from that, nominal stem because they are all nouns, extract the nominal stem, run a recursive logic, combine all of them, and finally you got the, the compound word in some sense. So that's how it is. In the first step it will become Nana Chidra, then it will become Nana Chitra Gatavodara, then it will become Nana Chitra Gatavodara Sthita, then the Deepa will be added, then now this is the Pradipadika, you can now use it and generate whatever you want to communicate. So I have shown many things. In fact, this Nritya Vasane Nataraja Raja Nanada Dakkam Nava Panchavaram. This Nataraja, when he was doing his dance, He played this Dakka 14 times. The Maheshwari Sutra itself is a great mnemonic. People don't understand. They laugh at the nasal sound that is coming out of it. It's a great step in understanding how structured the Sanskrit language is. All those are fantastic ideas of how efficiently one can represent a language and construct a lot of rules to all these. So my chapter 5 appeared to be a good chapter for computer science students. Although it is about Sanskrit, it's all so interesting if you look at it. The language seems to be like that. So I thought I'll just show you a little bit of that. Of course, this Sena Chiti, there's a very interesting part to it. I knew that 200 bricks of 5 varieties make this shape. Nowhere I could get the picture correctly. It was 192, 193. It took 3 days for me to construct that. I did by myself. I sat down and then tried every possibility to get exactly 200 bricks of 5 different varieties. So there are 76 different type of altars, chitis, that you find in Kalpa Sutras. I mean, if you don't know cyclic geometry, you cannot construct any of them. Why cyclic geometry? Because Indians had a shanku, yes, pole and a thread. And tie the thread to the pole, what can you do? You can only generate a circle, nothing more than that. If you tie a thread to a pole, the only shape you can generate is circle. But with circle, they have generated every shape that you want. That's called cyclic geometry. In Canada and US, they are teaching rope geometry as an elective. Sulba Sutra is nothing but rope geometry. Sulba is thread. So our complex construction, our Varaha Mahira also, I think Brahmagupta has a lot of cyclical quadrilateral, so many interesting ideas. They all thought about some 2000 years back, at least. Bodhayana Sulba Sutra is even before that. So these are all not a fancy thing. It's a very nice principle. In fact, people may be wondering, why do we need a pi? Because Garha Patni and Ahavaniya, one is circular, another is square. But the rule is both of them should have the same area. When you construct an altar, which is circular, another which is square, both the area has to be same. Without pi, you cannot solve that problem. Let's say pi a square, pi r square is equal to a square. A is the side of the square, r is the radius of the circle. Somewhere you need a pi. That's why Indians knew pi. Because they have to make Garhapatri and Ahavaniya and Dakshinagni. Then of course, Professor Iyengar, there's a wonderful paper I read, I will never forget that, on this Dashapurna Veti, of how the phases of the moon. There's a beautiful paper that Professor Iyengar has written, which generated this nice shape and so on. So all these are part of a great legacy of mathematics. Many of us don't know. Our mathematics teachers don't know. Forget about our students. We don't know any of this. This is, in modern parlance, we call it as Pascal's triangle, but it is part of Chanda Shastra, the Varna Meru. The Varna Meru, as I told you, that binary logic and all that, in that he also has what is called Varna Prastara. And this is called Varna Meru. And this is what is being taught to us as Pascal's triangle now. Whereas this is available in 2nd century BC. These ideas are all part of Chanda Shastra and so on. Well, if you take dyes, paints, perfumes and things of that kind, well, it is a matter of great pride that Ajanta paintings have not faded. Ellora, I went to Sigaria in Sri Lanka, which have the same thing there. It's a huge rock, and the top of it there are these Buddhist paintings and so on. They have not faded. They have been neglected, and there is a certain deterioration on account of it. So if we have been very good in paints and dyes, which have not faded for a long time, I'm sure there is a technology behind it. So if we dip into it, we are able to find. For example, chapter 40 of Vishnu Dharmottara Purana, there is one very nice lady by name Stella Kremsrish. 1930, she wrote some beautiful books. She wrote on this. She was here for about 10, 12 years in Calcutta actually. And Hindu Temple, such a wonderful book. The Hindu Temple that she has written, Stella Kremsrish. It's a good book to read actually, which gives ideas on how we have been able to think about. Our Puranas are all very encyclopedic. In fact, many of our people don't know that you cannot write Purana just like that. There is a Pancha Lakshana and a Dasa Lakshana. There is a methodology to write a Purana. It is not just a set of stories which are all weaved together to make it interesting. No. there is a Vamsho, Sarga, Upasarga, Vamshottara, all those are there. There are 5 Mukhya Lakshanas and 5 secondary Lakshanas. They are all encyclopedic. It beautifully portrays different thought processes, lot of information on agriculture, information on the fetal growth from 4th week to 20th week is available in some Vishnu Purana. Somewhere I have quoted it in one of the chapters in the book and have shown how they have thought about it. It's a conversation between Narada and somebody in which you actually find lot of agricultural practices and details are available. We haven't covered it in the book. Agriculture is one area where we missed again. Plant sciences and agriculture, we need to do a lot of things. 64th chapter also talks about perfumes. Varaha Mahira's Brihat Samhita is again an encyclopedic word. It's truly a Brihat Samhita. A variety of things are there. People can look at astronomy, can look at... in fact, there is one, I don't know whether it was in Brihat Samhita, I found one chapter in which the entire issue of love making, how a young man should approach a woman, and then everything is available. It's not Indians were just throwing their hands off. It's not possible, no? That's why I'm saying problems are as old as rocks and rivers, and people have always found solutions. It's very important for us to really understand what have they looked at and how they looked at. There's a lot of value in knowing it and so on. So the Gandha Yukti, the 37 verses in which the permutation combination problem has been solved in that Gandha Yukti. Varaha Mihira also talk about Vajralepa. How do you prepare a wall? Why these paintings are not fading? Because much depends on how do you prepare the wall. So there's a Vajralepa. How do you actually prepare a Vajralepa? How do you apply a coating, the first coating on the surface in which you want to actually make a painting? All those are there. And I think it is in Varaha Mihira's Brihat Samhita, there are 5 humanoids for male and 5 humanoids for female. The entire iconography uses only that. So I was wondering, our fashion technology, they should teach that first. Because if there, it's a proportion of face to neck to all that, I think it is in Brihat Samhita only. 5 humanoids for male, 5 humanoids for female. Everybody quotes only that. Even in Vastu Shastra I saw it. They quote only from there. The entire iconography draws from there. Then, textile manufacturers must get into it. Ready-made manufacturers, fashion technology must read all that and understand what are these proportions. Maybe we have solved a lot of problems in ready-made. Exceptions are there. They are, double X, triple X, plus is a different problem. That we will have to separately solve anyway. But by and large, it looks like the human geometry is fairly standardized. However, it may look a little different and so on. All those information is available. Vastu, I was also thinking Vastu means you break your bedroom wall and then do it again, or you put a red color or a yellow color. I thought like that. But when I started reading Samarangana Sutradhara, 3 different books of Samarangana Sutradhara I read. Then this one German has written a nice book on Mayamatam. IGNCA has that. It was interesting to read. When I read these, I realized Vastu is very different from what mental model vast number of Indians may actually have. Vastu has, of course, it certainly talks about town planning. It's about site selection, design of towns and villages and capital city, land use patterns and zoning regulations, all those are part of it. It talks about civil architecture, prasadas and royal temples and Goshala, Ashwashala, Chikishala, Pustakalaya, so many different designs are available there. Public buildings and pillared halls and large buntups and so on. So a whole lot of things are there. And then there's a great detail on temple architecture anyway. You have the Nagara style, which is the North Indian thing, and then you have Dravidian style and 11 stories and 13 stories. Very nice, very elaborate. The number of varieties I just lost count after I read it for the sake of understanding it. I realized it's such a variety of designs which have been provided in all these texts. Then it also talks about a lot of, that's why I said Vastu is creating anything artistic. So it's all about paintings, furniture, doors and sculptures, they are all part of Vastu. The Shilpa are all part of the Vastu actually. Then Vastu also has quite a few other things. In fact, there are separate chapters. I think 77th chapter in Samarangana Sutradhara talks about the workforce, Stapati, Shilpin, Vardaki, takshaka, how you select and what are the roles, what kind of skills that they should bring to the table. All those are written. Then how do you choose building material, wood, etc., etc., right? And the great concept of Vastu Purusha Mandala. From a simple 2 by 2 up to 32 by 32, 10,000, 1,024 squares. It's a beautiful zoning and a layout. More than that, the basic belief is there are Pancha Bhutas. It's a living. For us, many things are, see, sun, we are taught. Sun is taught as a mixture of inert gases of all complicated things. But simple logic tells me, if the sun rises, 6 billion or 6 trillion creatures come to life. How can a lifeless entity bring so many people to life? That's not possible. Common sense says it's not possible. Sun must be a living entity. For us, these Panchabhutas are living entities. So Vastu Purusha Mandala is a way by which you align and be with the living entities when you put up something where you want to stay and spend your lifetime. I mean, there's a lot of interesting thought in it. It's not what today's Vastu consultants are saying. It's much bigger and larger than that. And I am sure every school of architecture immediately must get into these Vastu texts and they must teach. After all, we are missing a great deal on that. This is just, Nandyavarta model of how do you, Swastika model is there. You have Karmuka is there, Padmaka is there. So different models are available for how do you create your layout and so on. People say Chandigarh is designed on a particular model. Jaipur is based on, they are approximate, not really exactly. Maybe a little closer to it, city like Madurai can also be looked at very seriously. They are all very close to some of the Vastu town planning models and so on. So, there is a certain zoning, everything is there if you're part of it. Today, the biggest problem in Bengaluru is just behind my house is a 20,000 or a 200,000 square feet software technology park. So, the residence is gone now. And next to there will be one coffee factory or something. We have given everything thrown into the wind. I think we should go back. Understand there is a lot of thinking which has gone behind zoning. There's a good reason for it. In fact, in the second chapter of Arthashastra, you will find a beautiful description in one of the chapters, such a beautiful description of the capital city, which is how do you locate what, you locate where, and how you zone it. Everything is available in grade, which I have described in that chapter on, Then comes to Arthashastra. I want to very quickly touch on it. Arthashastra works, although this appears only in the 6th chapter. There are 15 books, let me say. But this is defined only in the 6th book, the Sapta Prakritis, which is the fundamental building block for Arthashastra. It says, Swami, Amatya, Janapada, Durga, Kosha, Danda, Mitra Prakritaya. That is the shloka. But it comes in 6th chapter. But the whole Arthashastra is weaved on this mechanism. And in fact, I was planning to actually offer a full 3-credit course on Arthashastra and management. Because I found for everything that I read here, I found an equivalent in modern management, which we are also teaching. Very quickly, I'll show it. This is the equivalent I found in a business organization, which goes exactly with Arthashastra. I have given a very extensive lecture on this in a couple of places where this thought came. You have the owner, you have the key personnel, you have the markets and the stakeholders, which is equivalent of the Janapada actually. What is Janapada for a business enterprise? This is the Janapada. Then you have the strategic barriers, which is the Durga. The know-how and the patented things, and there are strategic barriers for every business organization. You have, of course, finances, which is equivalent to that. You have controls and processes, which is the Danda part of it. And you have the collaborators. For every one of them, I have a fair amount of understanding of what is happening. For example, the board CXOs and consultants form the Amatya, equivalent of a business organization. You have employees, customers, channel partners, and service providers who actually is the Janapada for an organization. For a business organization, they form the Janapada. So, a lot of ideas in Janapada, we can actually understand and map it onto it and make a certain understanding of what is the equivalent of public administration in management. You have the know-how, patents, unique processes, etc., etc. That is the Durga part of it. So, how do you strategize your Durga? You have to learn from that and bring it here, actually. Audit, compliance, controls, welfare, accountability, CSR, etc., all these are the Danda part. That is the Danda equivalent of what being talked about in Arthashastra actually. Then of course you have the joint ventures and alliances and technology transfer, etc., all those are the, in fact, chapter 7 to 12 in Arthashastra, there is, I think, chapter 9, I think, there's a good amount of discussion on this. I don't know whether I have it here. I found how those ideas can be taken for market expansion today. Some interesting ideas in Arthashastra, I was able to see how they actually, here it is. There are 6 methods of territorial expansion that he talks about, Sandhi, Vigraha, Asana, Yana, Samshaya and Dvaidi Bhava. And I find for each one of them, for each one of them, I could have asked an equivalent question in my business management lens. For example, how do we increase the market share? Because Arthashastra, one of the preoccupation is the territorial expansion. Chanakya has given a lot of emphasis to talking about it, the 12 circle of kings and enemy is enemy, there are second circle, third circle, all those are described in books 7 to 9, actually in Arthashastra. They are all very important principles to teach marketing management and territorial expansion and things of that kind. That was the initial thought. I am to read it for the sake of book, I read it in a particular way. But if you have to design an elective, I will sit down and read it even more carefully because the thoughts are already there. I will have to only draw it carefully and place it properly and so on. How should we negotiate with potential collaborators? How do you deal with competitors? When and when not to plan for a new market entry? Because there is the asana and yana has a different meaning actually. And he gives reasons why sometimes you should not. And you have to stay put. And Dvaidi Bhava is another one. How do you do something with somebody and do something else with somebody else? This is a very rich area in which Arthashastra Chanakya has spoken about. I am sure in strategic management and marketing management and territorial expansion, we should draw, according to me, substantially from Arthashastra. We will be able to get some good insights to actually deal with them. So anyway, I will leave it here. I don't want to keep going. I'll stop here just to say the textbook, as your VC was also sort of showing, that's the book, Introduction to Indian Knowledge Systems. 3 of us have co-authored it. 2 of my other co-authors have been working in Chinmaya Vishavidyapit. And in fact, the idea of Indian Knowledge System, we started, I was the VC, but I always say, if you are a VC or anything in a startup, for example, I was the janitorial worker, I was the teacher, I was the strategizer, I was the recruiter, I was the fund, everything I was actually. So I offered a course called Indian Knowledge Systems. I said the best thing is for me to put my foot, step into it and help the other 2. He created an IKS 1 and IKS 2 and then offered it there. Of course, that had us, from there we have moved on. But these ideas of Indian Knowledge System started in 2015 for us. And from then on, we had been pushing it a little bit and so on. So this has 14 chapters. It talks about the what, why and how of the IKS in some ways. I quickly showed you a little bit of that. 410 pages, extensive original quotes. Every chapter will have detailed end notes in which we have actually quoted the original shlokas so that people, there are enough people here to wait with their guns trained, shoot it down somehow, saying all these are nonsense, and because we have used to it for 60, 70 years now. So we have to be prepared for it. So we were also very careful and we wanted to make sure that we lay our hands more firmly on things which we can stand by and so on. Obviously, it was the first of its kind in India, and it peeps into a number of applications as I showed you. Actually, when we started writing, it is AICT which asked us to write this book. But then we realized, after we finished writing the book, and we'll add 2-3 chapters in the second edition anyway, what we found was, I think, in fact, in the first chapter, I have also said different streams, how can they use the chapters and create a course. Because, you don't have to teach everything to all the streams, but but anyway, it has 4 parts as of now. Although psychology, Ayurveda and all that should not be here, it should be part of science in any case. But the way we have done it now, we have, for the moment, kept it here. As we expand the book, we'll have to slightly sort of rearrange. But the point is, these are very important chapters. We talk about some elements of Tarka, where how do you establish the Pramana Shastra. See, Padavakya Pramana Shastra is our culture. So we can't get into a Vakya Shastra, but at least a little bit of Pada Shastra and Pramana Shastra, which is there in chapter 5 and chapter 7 of this book actually. Chapter 6 is a very interesting chapter. I think you will be stunned to see how we have thought about numbers, how we have thought about representing numbers, the Bhuta Sankhya, the Katapayadi and all those are a very interesting thing. Of course, then there's a good section on, since we primarily it was for AICT, we thought we will put science, engineering, technology, town planning and all that. But anyway, we had put a governance and health and wellness and so on. So in a combination of all these, we can actually offer it for different streams because it allows itself to naturally do it that way and so on. I will end with a few thoughts on some issues on teaching, since we are many of us in research and so on. But the first thing I want to make it very clear to all of us, some of us are already aware, you cannot open a book and then straight away say, let me teach financial management. You need to do a lot of work to get a business management out of Arthashastra. You can read, but you have to bring your own domain knowledge and then connect it. I teach a full 3-credit course on Bhagavad Gita. I have to stop the 150 students because there is only so much I can teach. It's hugely popular. For the last 10 years, I'm teaching in IIM Bengaluru, a course called Management Paradigms from Bhagavad Gita. But the effort required is, it talks contemporary challenges, but I use 200 out of 700 slokas. I use the actual slokas. I don't talk about Gita. I talk Gita. I bring 200 slokas and then discuss the slokas in the classroom. But it requires a certain amount of effort. This is the first thing. Because they are not written for management and, rhinoplasty or this or that. They are beautiful thoughts. I think that's one important thing we need to understand. You cannot open and then use it and straight away teach. I think that's a shraddha that and the dedication that we have to bring. That we have a domain expertise. I know what to look for. I will keep on putting that lens. Whatever comes out of it, I will take it out. I think that's a very fruitful approach. We know that certain texts lend itself, but then we need to do that homework because they are not readily available like that. For example, unless somebody says Lagu was 1 and Guru was 0, we would miss the entire binary mathematics as an example. So we need to bring that. We need to make effort to bring. You can't say Atakkena prayiktoyam papam charati purusha. You should say what is the context? Where are we talking about this? Why do this question is very important? How does it make sense in a management setting? That knowledge we have to connect it. So that is one issue. Second issue is the presentation methodology, unfortunately, has become completely alien to us. We have missed this. I teach my students, when IAMB students come 10 years back, the first session after they come in, we have a 1-week orientation. The first session, they used to ask me 15 minutes. I go and tell the story of Prahlada, Narsimha Avtara. These guys, the students really go their hair split. They say, here is a professor who is coming and doing Katha Kalaksheva at the beginning of. Then I tell them, after half of what I say, they all become serious. I tell them when Hiranyakashipu was torn to pieces, nobody could go near Narsimha. Prahlada went. And when Prahlada begged for, for all that his father has done, Lord Narsimha said that moment you are born, 14 generations on this side and 7 generations this side is redeemed. I tell that story to my AMB students. And I tell them, the moment you paid your fee to come into this institute, that day you have become the top 0.3% of Indian society. You know why I am saying that? We have 5 counselors there. Our students need so much of psychological counseling. So I bring a story, but bring it to a context. I do all the time that. So what happens is, I am a professor of operations management. I say Draupadi Vastra Paharana. First question I ask is there enough raw material available to manufacture sari? Is there a manufacturing capacity of the sari balanced? If it is not balanced, Draupadi will be either moving to the right or I can explain all that with my equations. See, this is how we understand Indian knowledge system. Draupadi's Vastra Parana is not meant for it. Or if Kannapana, I tell a lot of the stories. My students, initially they don't understand. Then I get into the depth of the insight. These stories are meant for a certain insight. Indian knowledge system is not stula, it is sukshma. We don't know how to read it because we have not been taught. We laugh at it along with the Westerners because we don't know how to make sense of it. This is a very serious issue. We need to understand there is a sukshma tattva. Agnir Murta Chakshasu Chandra Suryo, there is one mantra in Mundagopanishad. Moment you say, Surya and Chandra are the two eyes, I can even say Soma Surya Agni Lochana, Agni, Surya and Chandra, and I can say 3C1. Whether sun is on the right eye or left eye or in the middle eye, you can waste your time like that. It's not meant for it. Do you know what is the idea there? If there is no sun in this world, a blind person is better than you and me. The only source of light in this world is sun. The Agni and the Chandra are the derived source. That's the presiding deity of I. That is what is mentioned in that mantra. You don't get it by reading it in English translation of that. So therefore, this presentation methodology is very unique. I say Indian knowledge system is like cartoon TV. Don't sit in a cartoon TV and say, how can a cockroach drive a scooter, go to a bank and do it. Kids don't ask that question. The moment you ask that question, you have lost the charm of seeing a cartoon. That's why you or they should not see cartoon TV. Indian knowledge system is like cartoon TV. It has deep ideas. If you are willing to synthesize ideas, it has a treasure. If you want to read on the top of it and make a logical sense of the words, you will laugh along with the foreigners. They have been taught like that in 100 years. We have lost our ability to read Indian knowledge. Please develop that capability. It's a lot of sukshma, very interesting sukshma there. That's how the presentation style. You cannot ask. You cannot ask why cartoon TV is like that. Please don't ask that question. You understand the dharma of that and then try to make sense of what is there. That's the problem. So we are very alien to it. So that's why we can't decipher the content. So first we have to cover these hurdles. And we can cover this hurdle only with Shraddha. If you have deep desire that I want to bring my cultural forefathers valuable information, I believe in it, I'll bring it out, you will find a way. But it requires a little hard work. But I think that's a commitment that we do. Without ayasa, there is no payasa. It's not possible. Without pain, there is no gain. No? So how can it be any different? So I am saying this because I am telling you many people genuinely go and after some time they run away. However genuinely interested they are, because the Shraddha needs to be deep. We have a very shining epitome of that in Professor Iyengar here. Kind of work he is doing, I am humbled on seeing the kind of work he has been doing for the last 25-30 years. I can't make most of what he does, I can understand. Certainly I read with interest. Sometimes I understand what is going on there and so on. And there are a few important pitfalls we need to avoid. I want to make this out of my own experience of seeing it happening. I think ignorant teaching is more damaging than no teaching. A lot of people jump into it and then do things. So I say if you are a language expert, don't teach introduction to anesthesia. Don't do that. That's not a good idea because it's not correct. However, genuinely I have a love for it. The point I'm trying to make is we need to make that effort. I mean, Indian knowledge system is not rocket science. Many of it is part of our DNA. We have not just looked at it. If you are willing to look at it, the Veda Mata will open for us. I have no doubt. I had absolutely no knowledge of Sanskrit until I did my PhD. While I was doing PhD, I came across Samskrita Bharati, but that's a 35-year story. And it went on and on and on. The blessings of the Lord, I have moved. So if I can be an example for you, please. I didn't know Sanskrit. I was from a village in Tamil Nadu. I have not seen a big city in my life until I went for my IIT. So my exposure was very limited during my formative years, but that didn't stop me. So what I'm saying, let us bring that Shraddha. It's very, very important. Otherwise, we will be actually doing a much bigger damage, which many people do it. They do a half-baked attempt. This another problem that people have is they have too generic and sweeping conclusions. For example, there is this matta parataram nam anyatasti dhananjaya mayi sarvamikam protam sutre manigana iva. They say it is like string theory because there is a thread and there is a bead and all that. String theory has a lot of mathematics and probability and all that. Let us not oversimplify in our anxiety to say IKS. Let us not waste our time saying IKS has everything. We don't have to do it. Let's dip into it, understand it in its own ways, put it, I think it will speak for itself. Some people think out of anxiety, no, we have to make it more attractive and all that. They tell all kinds of things. I think we should avoid that. And using the old knowledge to explain what is already practiced today. This is a normal methodology people use. That is to say, oh, what is you say is also available there. That you can do for some 5%, 10%, but that's not the idea. The idea is to say what is there. Let us not compare. We don't have to compare. We are only saying there is a body of knowledge which has some interesting ideas which it's worth looking at. I think we have to take that approach. Somehow we feel the pressure. and then start glorifying the past, which does counter marketing at times. Using foreign language translations of Indic knowledge is authentic. Please try to avoid as much as possible. I have also done it and I've learned my own way of how they are inadequate, and sometimes it can be misleading also and so on. Secondly, you cannot see Raja Ravi Verma's painting in black and white. Don't try to do it. You will get the substance but not the spirit. I mean, Raja Ravi Verma's painting, please see it in its original form. So therefore, please invest in Sanskrit. Sanskrit is the simplest language I ever seen in my life. It's not a complex language. It's the simplest language. If you are a logical person, if you are a little logic-oriented person, it's just a matter of time before you will master the language. I am telling you, as I told you, I had no experience, but then, I was able to go in a particular way. I could actually make a certain sense of what it is. So I think Sanskrit is very important. Please spend it. It's at the end of it, it's also, Sanskrit is such a beautiful language. It influences your thinking process. Words are also beautiful. Loka, Lokru and Lochru. I mean, each one of them bring a certain perspective to life. That's the charm of the language. So at least, if not anything, you'll get the charm of a certain perspective. So I strongly advocate for Sanskrit, which will make things much easier. And as I told you, excessive reliance of translated works is not a good idea. We may need it, but then it is important we read the original also and use a combination of that so that you can triangulate and develop your own understanding of what is being told. Even when we wrote the book, that's what we did. We were very particular. We will read the shlokas, do a padacheda, try to understand what the shloka is. Then we say what commentaries are saying. Then we are able to connect it, make our own sense of where I may fully agree with somebody, where I may have to slightly. All that I think we need to do. That will make the whole exercise very interesting. Okay, so I would only say that a civilization which is more than 3,000 years old obviously would have had a lot of very interesting ideas to sort of look at. I think there is very little to argue for or against it. It's a very simple common sense. But the point is, all these fell for a variety of reasons. That's something which I wanted to say. First part was, a large part of the country was under foreign rule for nearly the last 700 years in various formats. From 1200 AD onwards, it has been off and on happening. Massive destroying of our 6 universities happened in 1100 AD, 1200 AD. That's where it started. So when the ruling class has a different priority, I think we are all at the end of the day ordinary people. We will only align to what gives us 3 times food here. So therefore, it is not surprising that the ruling class contribute what skills to wean away and what knowledge to keep. And this society has been subjected, given that we have been very good so far in even retaining most of what we have. That's the amazing part of it, given this kind of a thing. But that has been a reality. Second thing, there was a very well developed caste system, and the Britishers painted it in such a bad light and all that. I think much of our knowledge we lost because we lost the caste system. Because it was an oral transmission, and the father, typically the son or the family members, that's why all goldsmiths were of a particular caste, or metalsmiths. I mean, it was not a bad thing. It was such a wonderful thing. Today, some great artists are sitting in front of a computer and doing a programming. This is what we have brought. We have made a cookie cutter out of every individual. Modern Western education has made a cookie cutter. Whereas we say that everybody has a unique prakriti. I must tell you, I went to one of my relatives' house and there was a 9:6 painting of Sharada, which is there in Sringeri Math. You'll see it on the left side of the main hall, Guru Bhavana. It was 20% done. There was a boy working on it. I went to their house around 7:30 till 9 o'clock. I was chatting with my relative. That boy went. After I went, I asked, who is this boy? Looks like... So my relative told me, sir, this is 4 months' work. This boy is a software engineer in Infosys. Every day he comes here at 6:30. Between 6:30 and 9:30, he does this painting. Then I told, this painting keeps his job. The job is not keeping his painting. He is basically a very good painter. You have made him a software engineer in Infosys today. So we have weaned away the caste system, and in the process we weaned away a structured methodology of transmission of knowledge. Abruptly we lost it. This is another reason why we lost. British Raj imposed a mining ban. The government also took a few steps in the last 200 years. And that weaned away, production ban, tax and all that, which means metal working has to come to a grinding halt. You do the ore mining from here, send it, value add it, bring it back, pay 10 times more money and then make them rich, you become a pauper. Many industries, it's just an example, textile for example. In many places, that's what happened. And educational system, major changes were introduced by Macaulay. Okay? And we are still suffering that. You and I are part of a Macaulayan system. Whether you like it or not, we'll have to accept that. So from his note, I pulled a few sentences from his Macaulay's note, which he wrote. Because the note was, the Queen at that time said, £1 million. How do we further the language in this country? And Macaulay said there are 3 possibilities, Arabic, Sanskrit and English. And then he argued about Sanskrit. These are things he said in that note, apparently. Accessible from a university website and in their archives and so on. The dialects commonly spoken among the natives of this part of India contain neither literary nor scientific information and are moreover so poor and rude that until they are enriched from some other quarters, it will not be easy to translate any valuable work into them. So our entire material that I presented have absolutely no scientific content. Please understand that. That's what is a sort of a statement. A single shelf of a good European library was worth the whole native literature of India and Arabia. I believe no exaggeration to say all the historical information which has been collected from all the books written in Sanskrit language is less valuable than what may be found in the most paltry abridgments used at preparatory schools in England. So the point, I'm not bothered about this. I'm not going to waste my time on this. All that I'm saying, if I am the architect of an education system and this is my mental model, then I can extrapolate what will happen 200 years from there, and that's where we are now. That's all I'm saying. I'm not bothered about the statement and I don't waste my time, and each one of us can take our own views. I'm not also interested in that. I'm only saying, if an architect of a new education system has this mental model, and if that society is forced by the ruling class to do something, in 200 years that society will be something of some kind, and that's exactly what we are now. So I think we need to really take a thing. So what can we do? Very quickly, the last slide. I'm sorry I have taken a much longer time. Bear with me for that. What can we do with Indian wisdom? These are the things. One possibility is these are the things. You can abandon them. A lot of people keep it in puja room. Nobody opens a Bhagavad Gita book. Every day I put puja, flowers for it. I tell you, if you want to die peacefully, please read Bhagavad Gita. Every one of us are born because we want to have the last sleep which is peaceful, sir. I tell you. All these are in between. Professor in JAIN college are all intermediate goals, sir. Every one of us want to have we should have the art of dying, not art of living. I am telling you. And if you want to know the art of dying, read a scripture like Bhagavad Gita. We keep it in a puja room and every day change the flowers on the top of it. Ramayana. How much material I see in Ramayana? I taught the entire Ramayana in about 102 sessions. I have a weekly satsang in which I taught 102 sessions, the entire Valmiki Ramayana. It was mind-boggling. So we can keep it in puja room and worship. This is another possibility. We can take positions without knowing what it contains. Indians have a license. You can go to the rooftop and say Bhagavad Gita is nonsense without reading one sentence in Bhagavad Gita. You will not say that of management or anesthesia. But you will say that of Indian knowledge systems. We have that license. I want to take back all those licenses first. In fact, some of my colleagues in IIM Bangalore discuss with me. I become very arrogant only at that point in time. I ask them, what have you read? I said, I won't discuss with you. Sorry. Will you discuss with me a subject of your matter expertise? You won't, no? I won't discuss with you. Sorry. But Indians think that they can talk anything about any scripture without even knowing what it contains. This is another preoccupation that we have. Or we glorify the past. We seem to glorify. In fact, there is so many WhatsApp. I am tired of this WhatsApp. They keep on saying, you read these Sanskrit guys. How do you know? I don't know anything. But every day I sort of transmit the WhatsApp. And these are all great disservice. I think it's time we seriously think about it. So anyway, these are one possibilities which many Indians are doing at this point in time. The other possibility is to get to know first and in a small way. I am a professor of mathematics, I will dip into mathematics. I am a professor of metallurgy, I will dip into metallurgy. Somebody says I am a chemistry, I am a linguist, I will look at only some Bhartrihari is this work or that work and try to understand what is the linguistic framework there. I am not asking you to dabble all over the place. That we will do 20 years later. Each one of us can take one baby step and we will change the face of this world forever. We can get India to be the Vishwaguru back. It's in our hands. He can do that. So I thought, with that thought, I will just leave here. I'm sorry I have taken a little longer time than what I thought. Bear with me for that. Thank you for this.
Well, friends, we had an excellent talk. I don't know what to say about it further. Can we have one or two questions?
Yeah, sure, sir.
Don't mind. You want to say something? If there are any okay.
It's a little too overwhelming for us.
Yeah, I can see that.
Sometimes already to sink in.
Yeah, and not only that, initially he started with this, which was intellectual. Eventually, the emotion as we belong to this country and all of us, share a culture. It's our common culture, and he made, as a speaker, other than all other things, to bring out something so that for the Indian knowledge system, this goes further. Excellent. A wonderful presentation as well as an oratory, I would say. Nevertheless, if there are one or two simple questions, which doesn't take time. Yes, madam. First for the university people, then
No, not at all. Not
don't mind.
Sir, thank you so much. This was really so overwhelming and something we really need. I'm Priyanka. I teach political science, public policy, administration, and that last section where you spoke about humanities and administration, that so strikes a chord with us who teach humanities. I always try to tell the students to read the Arthashastra or the original or say Manusmriti, but then we stop there. Exactly that methodology which you said, because the original is too difficult. So how do we bridge that gap with our students with that, sir?
Yeah, so first of all, original is not difficult.
Exactly.
Not difficult. So therefore, I think we should take, I always say this, if I go to Mount Everest, I am least bothered about Mount Everest. I am bothered about the first base camp. I would say, where is the first base camp? What is the methodology to go to the first base camp? After I go to the first base camp, I ask, where is the second? 10th base camp maybe, the 11th base camp is Mount Everest. So I think, madam, a very useful thing would be, you take a particular text, take your own time, pick in your own ways, you quote 2 or 3 pieces from that book, it will set fire for your students. If you say read, they won't read, but if you can intersperse some of your lectures, let it take some time. I don't think we are in great hurry. You can say, let me take Arthashastra. We have R.P. Kangle's beautiful work, and there are only 3 books you need for Arthashastra. Everything what you want Arthashastra, Shama Shastri's original book in 1905. R.P. Kangle, University of Mumbai, 1950, is beautiful 3-volume book is there. And then L.N. Rangarajan's book in 1980. They are not rocket science, I am telling you. You need a little patience. In your own pace, if you can read and assimilate and bring it, your students will just go past you in no time. I think every one of us must do in our own area like that. It will take a little time, but let it take.
Sir, I wish to thank you from the bottom of my heart for the inspiration you have given. I heard you for the first time in 2011, and you have, your article, Management Lessons from the Bhagavad Gita, I have your autograph. So based on that inspiration, I have been conducting, my past is that I'm the leadership head of IBM. I was, so I've led that initiative. So I conduct based on exactly the principles that you said, Bhagavad Gita for professionals. And where I bring in my experience of leadership development in IBM with every shloka. So it's so coincidental that just yesterday I finished 18 chapters, 700 shlokas, and my students, I bring my life experience to it and my knowledge. My PhD is in leadership systems. So if one signature from an inspiring teacher can do that, I definitely want to request you to sign this entire book, sir. And I will take it forward in my own way. Thank you so much for your inspiration.
Thank you.
Sir, the first slide you showed was about the political intent. And I'll be very honest in saying that That's a little worrying. I don't want to sound pessimistic. It really feels very good to understand the glory of our own heritage, wisdom and everything. And I hope we get the opportunity to prove it. I mean, I'm not saying it from that sense of the scientific proving or something, but definitely taking all this into consideration, the world needs to know what we stood for and what are our strengths. So going by that, would you think that because we lacked the political intent, this knowledge system was deeply, submerged under layers of dust? And now we have an opportunity, it is coming out. Let's be very honest about it and acknowledging that yes, the Rajashraya, which we get now, is helping us come out with it.
Absolutely. See, Dharampal wrote 5 volumes. I don't know whether you have seen it. Dharampal has written 5 volumes. Volume 3 is on Beautiful Tree, which is about the education. The word Beautiful Tree he borrowed from Mahatma Gandhi. He talked about the educational system as a beautiful tree, don't do something about the roots and all that. He talked about, from there he picked that word. When I read that book, what I realized is, I mean, it's very rich in data. It's not simply some impressions made about what happened and all. It's rich with data. For example, the Madras Presidency did a survey on the education system in Mysore, in Salem, Madurai, Visakhapatnam and all that, full of that data with which the book is written, that volume. What you see in that volume is, and you read it, what you see is the educational system in 18th century before Macaulay introduced this, far superior to the British system. In terms of penetration, in terms of the Shudras were more going to school than the forward caste. The Muslims and Shudras are far too many. Ladies were all getting taught. So many things are there. So I agree that there is a bit of discontinuity which has been created. And of course now the current political formation is thinking that we need to bring. But what I feel is, fortunately, despite all these, I think higher educational systems are by and large still fairly protected from the vagaries of the political system. So if this wave starts, I think this will have its own run.
Yeah,
for
the
20, 30
education
years.
was independent of the political support in ancient time. In fact, he referred to Arthashastra. Arthashastra doesn't have a public, for education adhikari. No, there is no education adhikari there. Like we have school inspectors and university inspectors and all that. There is none of that. There are 24 officers he lists, none for education. Education is something which people do on their own. Anyway, I don't want to go further on that. There's a very good point that was brought out. There is one question.
If I
Yes,
can
sir.
ask a question.
Yes,
So,
sir.
thank you so much for running through and taking us through all this rare wisdom and knowledge. Though it is so much of part of our DNA, but we are just ignorant. Like Atman, it is there, but we are all suffering and struggling. So thank you so much, and it is indeed a great beginning. But you will agree that unless we formalize it and connect it to the formal or modern form of research, its acceptability will always be restricted. What is your thought on bringing us some concerted and focused research on some part of it, which is the primary focus? For example, sustainability. If you see Indian system of living, where there is no waste creation or damage of environment, that is just an analogy, but more towards economy and business and science and technology. How can we initiate some research which can actually make its own claim without having any competition, and people will have only 2 choices, either to lose or to accept?
Yes, sir.
Thank
So let me put it slightly differently. I think what you are saying is very true. That IKS is not for the sake of just getting to know what it is. Ideally, it should be for something which can be, one can dive deep into it and so on. But the situation is so pathetic that we are in step 1 of the process now. I think there is enormous value in just first imparting what is there to our student fraternity, starting with our teaching fraternity and then the student fraternity. Because even if you have to get into a research, you should be equipped with a certain understanding of what the corpus is. So therefore, I think this effort is a very valuable effort. And a few years down the line, as more and more this sort of familiarity builds into the students and the teachers, inevitably the next step will be taken there. Let's say, can we pick up something from here? And because that's a very natural process for human beings, sir. You can't stop it. You have to only create a condition for it. So I think that way, my own reading is, if next 4 or 5 years, if we get it into the curriculum and then we sort of getting it there, that step will automatically start. Then of course one can have some intervention. Even now IIST is doing a lot of funding and all that kind of thing they are doing. So simultaneously when that starts, I think it will kickstart. It will happen. But we need to definitely do this before any of those, because unfortunately we don't know. We are completely out of it.
Yes, Professor, is there any?
Thank you, sir.
Oh.
Sir, one of my question is, in the definition slide, when you were defining, you read out one sloka. I just want to know the meaning of that. And second thing is, UGC allows graduate degree to be provided to artisans and expertise holders, even though they are not educated. Up till primary class, if they are educated, they are able to read and write. With that, we can provide a degree. University can grant a degree. So if we can actually provide degrees to those artisans and the metal workers, what you were talking about, we can place a stage. That's what one of my thought was.
I didn't know which shloka you referred to, because a few shlokas I quoted. So. Okay, I'm not able to recollect it.
The struggle that Arjuna was having.
Oh, atakkena prayuktoyam papam charati. See, Arjuna asked Krishna, kena prayuktaha, who is forcing me? Atakkena prayuktaha papam charati purushaha. Human beings engage in some wrong acts. You shout at somebody, you are very unfair to someone, you throw tantrums at somebody and so on. Anichanapi varshneya, I didn't have the icha. Coming to think of it a little later, I think and say, I should not have done it. Why did I do it? Anichanapi varshneya, baladiva niyojitaha, as though somebody has forcibly made me the victim of the situation. See, in modern parlance, they talk about becoming a victim of situation. That's precisely the question that he asked. He asked, why do people become victim of situations? Why do they do things about which they regret a little later? That's why I shout at my child today, I shout at you in a meeting today, tomorrow I come and tell you sorry, because tonight all these are going, why did I do it? You are a good, well-meaning friend for me. I didn't mean it, but I did it. That was the question he asked.
Can I ask one last question?
Oh, please.
Yeah. I think at the outset I really admire and appreciate the way in which you have presented all these ideas, sir. It is extremely good. And the way in which you have connected yourself, learning the Sanskrit after a long period of gap you have learned, and you were able to comprehend so much, you were able to relate the same thing to different fields. My special personal appreciation to you. Then, as we all know, I am from education background. Any kind of knowledge, if you want it to, unless you disseminate, it is difficult for other people to know the secret of it. For example, when we think of ordinary gold versus the diamond, one who knows the value of diamond always goes for purchasing the diamond. One who does not know always stick on to the silver or to the same analogy holds good here. Our traditional knowledge was restricted and stored, and it was not shared very easily. That is one of the reasons. Then the second one, in any knowledge, if it is written in a different language which is not familiar to us, I think it is very difficult for us to look into it. Therefore, ultimately I wanted to just say that if you wanted to make this rich knowledge, inherited knowledge, a knowledge that has been derived and evolved after so many years based upon our rich civilization, compared to political will, I think academically we have to do something. Because recently you are all seeing what will happen. Curriculum revision if you take now. Therefore, I think academicians should come forward. Wherever it is possible, depending upon the discipline, we have to integrate this knowledge. And electives, I think best way for making people to know if I know a little bit about one or two slokas in Sanskrit, let us say, after understanding its meaning, definitely I will be tempted to go for the next sloka. That is how it starts. Always we move from known to unknown, inductive approach. Therefore, I personally feel that all of us should join together and try to see that wherever it is possible, we should be able to integrate the same thing. As you have mentioned in psychology, for example, without these two aspects you have mentioned, teaching about the modern psychology is of no use unless we refer to the Hindu psychology or Indian psychology. I think academically, unless we do, I always feel that political will should not work. I personally feel. If I am wrong, you have to correct me. Therefore, I think it should go on our own, make people to understand the value, realize it, implement it, integrate it, and get the benefit out of it. Because for a child, anything you give, the child will learn. But who has to give to the child? In what way we have to give the knowledge to the child is our concern. Same thing. Once again, my special appreciation to you.
Thank you, sir. I agree with most of what you said. I think there is very little to contest on that. The only thing I want to tell you is I want to know why we both are speaking in English. My mother tongue is Tamil. Ramanuja was a Tamilian, Shankaracharya is a Malayali, Madhvacharya is a Kannadiga, if I had to use today's terms. Yet, they had a linked language called Sanskrit. You and I are speaking in English because today the linked language is English. So the question you are asking is, can we replace the linked language of English with that of Sanskrit, or at least have two linked languages? I think we must do it. Because there is a vast wisdom which is lying in something. Just because somebody came in 1813 and said, forget about it, foolishly we have gone behind him. So therefore, language part I will not really bother too much, because that's why you and I are speaking English, sir. Yes, sir. I would love to speak in my mother tongue, if there is a way. Unfortunately, I crave for it at times. I do my weekly lectures on Vedanta in English. I don't really relish it, if you really ask me. But then my crowd, there's the only thing that I can do now. I was in Iran for about 3 months. I was writing a book. I thought best things to hide there and finish writing the book. So I was there for 3 months. In my lifetime, for 3 months, I maintained Maunavrata. Would you believe? Because nobody knew English there. Nobody knew English there. I was supposed to teach a PhD level course. There I go and speak in English. I taught a course on computer simulation. And English in Iran is exactly like Sanskrit here. If I tell Sanskrit, you can sit and find, you cannot speak to me in Sanskrit. But somewhere you will figure out what it is. They were learning my lectures like that. So language is a very different, we'll have to take a choice. The only thing I would say is, I think each one of us I agree with most of what you say. I think if teachers can take one baby step, it will just flare up. It's just a matter of a few years. It can, politics and all those, let them remain. We can keep going. I think I will agree with you.
Yeah, it's a wonderful, wonderful conclusion that it is here in a university, we all agree that it is the teachers who have to push these things. It is the educationists, it is the students, teachers, the academicians. Politicians will do so many other things. Let us not worry about it. It's a wonderful conclusion which has come out. I request my colleague to propose a vote of thanks. Dr. Shankar Raja.
Thank you, sir. I deem it an honor to propose the vote of thanks on this occasion. Foremost, let me thank our esteemed guest, Dr. M. Mahadevan from IIM Bangalore. To thank him in Sanskrit, Hridayantaralatah pranamami bhavantam. I also propose thanks to our esteemed Vice Chancellor, Dr. Raj Singh, for chairing the session today. Also to my colleagues, both senior as well as junior, who have both explicitly as well as implicitly helped us in conducting this program and seen to it that it meets a successful conclusion. And finally, last but not least, I also thank the audience for their active participation and the interesting questions they posed to our guest. Thank you and good afternoon.
Thank you, sir. You have taken a lot of time to be here with us. And